All right, so we are back over here at the table because today we're doing another tier list. Now, a lot of you don't appreciate my tier lists and think that they're a little chaotic and don't make any sense. So today, I'm still gonna do those in the future, but today we're gonna do like an actual ranking video of a tier list and kind of make the categories a little bit more make a little bit more sense. My tiers are always in order. Like top tier is always top tier and bottom tier is the lowest tier. So the in-betweens are kind of random and chaotic, I agree. But technically all of my tiers are in order anyway. But I hear you, you want normal tier list, we're gonna do normal one. Kind of. So horror tropes, they can be a great thing in horror movies or they can be a horrible, horrible decision. Tropes usually tend to make horror movies a little bit more predictable when they've been done so many times. I mean, that's what makes a trope. A trope is the repetition of it. But when used correctly, I really do think some tropes are acceptable and also necessary in horror. We love a good, like, different type of horror movie every now and again, of course. You know, we like to see movies be original, but when it uses a horror trope correctly, it can really catch the viewer off guard. So today we're going to be ranking them. I think I have 21. But first, I just want to thank Shudder for sponsoring today's video. Shudder is a premium streaming service for all things horror, thriller, and suspense. Their collection includes blockbuster hits, horror classics, and original and exclusive content such as their Creepshow TV series done by Greg Nicotero, which is the executive producer of The Walking Dead, as well as must-see movies such as Host and The Dark and the Wicked, two of my favorites on Shudder. They just added some amazing classic horror movies such as House on Haunted Hill, including the remake, which I highly recommend if you have not seen that. Also, the original 13 Ghosts. They also have the 80s documentary on there, In Search of Darkness Part 2, which kind of goes into the practical effects of 80s horror and all the history of 80s horror. It's amazing. You can stream Shudder completely ad-free on all of your devices, including iOS and Android, Xbox One, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and Google Chromecast, all for $5.99 a month or $56.99 per year. Or of course, you can try Shudder for free for 30 days if you go to shudder.com and use my code POSSESS30. So the first thing that I want to address is a lot of people have a lot of commentary on my tier list because they don't make sense to them. They don't like my ranking system. They don't like my rankings, period. That's okay. It's all based in opinion. I'm just here for your entertainment, essentially. But a lot of people like to use this image as a backup for their argument, thinking that I ranked these candy bars. Why would I go in and rank these candy bars prior to doing a video? This is how the website comes, and I have to go in and delete all of Why are we loading? What are we doing? This is the default. I would never rank the candy bars like this. If you ever want to know my ranking, maybe one day I'll start out with my actual ranking of all of these things, but this is how the website just starts out with the template. Okay, so we have 5 tiers per usual. I like a good 5 tier list, so let me just get rid of all of these and let's start our categories. Okay, for this first category, we are going to say needed in every horror movie. Self-explanatory, top tier, wouldn't mind if it was in every single horror movie. Wouldn't get tired of it. Next, we have the A category, which is A for acceptable. I would tolerate it in horror movies. Even if it was in every single horror movie, it would be okay with me. Next up, once in a while. There's a line for these ones. We don't need to see it every single time. Once in a while, it's enjoyable when done properly, but not in every movie. Next one, I'll let it slide. Meaning, I'll be okay if they include this every once in a while. Well, not every once in a while. If they include it in movies, I'm usually just like, okay, I'll let it go for now, but I'm definitely going to be talking about it as a negative in my review. And finally, the last category, please stop doing this. There are just so many tropes. I imagine a lot of these tropes that I chose are going to be in this category. No, I'm not spoiling anything. I have not planned out where the tropes are going, but I just have a feeling that this category is going to be hefty. Okay, let's start with trope number 1. They're all randomized, so I don't know what's going first. The killer isn't actually dead. You know, it comes in for another surprise. This is usually a frustrating trope for me because if they had just double tapped the killer, it probably wouldn't be a problem. This also kind of goes in with the trope of the extreme strength of a killer, like the unbelievable strength of one, unlike Michael Myers, because that is like an actual explanation. Well, actually, there is no explanation for Michael Myers. He just is an enigma, but I'm not counting him in the super strength. Killer Isn't Dead, I'll say acceptable. If that was in most movies, I mean, it does get old. All these tropes get old. At some point, they all get old. But I'll put it in acceptable because, you know, that's not the worst culprit on this list. Next, we have It Was All a Dream. This one is great the first 3 times we've seen it, right? I think a lot of these tropes are actually really cool in concept. In execution, though, they're really not done well, in my opinion. So It Was All a Dream. I love this trope, but overplayed, you know? It's not done properly all the time, but I will put it in acceptable because I will accept that as a storyline or plot point. Unconvinced authority. This also goes into parents not believing children or partners not believing their spouse when they say they saw something and they're like, you just need to take a nap. All of that is under the umbrella of unconvinced authority. Unconvinced characters, you know? Just people who have no clue what's really going on and yeah, don't believe the main character. I do actually think that this is a top tier trope because it's realistic. Now, not always. There's always exceptions to all of these tropes, by the way, and exceptions to where I rank them. There are movies that I don't agree with within that category, if that makes any sense. But I'm gonna put it in needs to be in every horror movie because it is just the most realistic part of a lot of movies, right? But just the authority doesn't care that much, which is so accurate, or the cops just don't believe you. So accurate. Have sex and die. The famous one. This also goes into over-sexualization of women, and also if there's like a dumb bimbo or promiscuous character, we know that they're going to die. I'm not a fan of this at all. I think you should be able to have sex in a horror movie and not die. I think they have the right to do that. I'm gonna put it in, please stop doing this, because it's okay. I'm not really into sex in horror movies. It's definitely not my favorite thing, especially over-sexualization of women. Not my favorite thing in horror, but we can't deny that it has been a huge part of the horror genre, is that kind of combination. So I think we need to stop with the trope of like, oh, this couple is doing it, they're definitely gonna die. Mostly because we've just come to expect that, so it's become a little bit too predictable. Next up, we have The Final Girl. This one is actually pretty much all of your favorite horror tropes. I had asked you guys on Instagram for your favorite and least favorite horror tropes to kind of help me gauge my list, and or at least, you know, collect all the tropes I could think of, and The Final Girl was a lot of your favorite trope. It does depend on if it's cheesy or not, but typically I'm all for the girl surviving. So I'm gonna put it in every horror movie. I agree, it's a great trope, and I'm not really tired of it. However, there is an exception that, again, this goes into the sexuality exhibited in movies, and that typically is a negative for the characters. The final girl being the virgin. Obviously, Cabin in the Woods kind of poked fun at this trope. Cabin in the Woods poked fun at a lot of tropes. So I'm all cool with the final girl, but she doesn't necessarily have to be a virgin. Like, she doesn't have to be the non-sexual one, you know? Next. Unhinged women. This sounds like a negative, or like, oh, they're just crazy. Like, it's not a negative. These movies are fantastic. The ones that have women going through trauma and showing an accurate portrayal of a reaction to that trauma. Obviously, I chose Midsummer here as an example. I think it's a great movie and a great story. Tragic, very tragic, but it's a great story. So I don't want every movie, though, to have an unhinged woman, because I feel like then we're getting into weird territory where it does then become a negative. So I'm gonna put this in once in a while. I love this trope, but it will get overplayed really fast, and I don't want women to be portrayed like that all the time. Oh, my favorite one in the world. Just kidding. Jump scares. You already know how I feel about jump scares. They're honestly fine if done well, and I'm so picky when it comes to jump scares because I do not want it to have booming music. I need it to follow through. You already know this. You know how I feel about jump scares. So I'll put it in, I'll let it slide actually. I don't think we should stop doing jump scares. I think it's an essential part of the horror genre and it does make it fun for a lot of people. I just went and saw The Unholy in theaters. Horrible. Didn't like that movie, sorry. But they did some of my least favorite jump scares I've ever seen. That movie, I'll probably do a review on that movie, to be honest, a little rant maybe. That movie felt like when someone who doesn't make horror movies thinks that that's what a horror movie is supposed to be, and just added a bunch of unnecessary jump scares in there, and I didn't like it. So the good old running and falling. We love a good running and falling moment. This one maybe added tension the first time we saw this in a horror movie way back in the day, but now we roll our eyes every single time, and don't you deny it. You can't deny that when they fall, you're like, come on. Really? Is it accurate? Sometimes. Sometimes people are genuinely so flustered that they do trip and fall. It happens. I'll put it in, I'll let it slide because, like the reasons I just stated, sometimes it is an accurate portrayal of what someone would do if they're running away from someone. The thing that makes it annoying is when they trip on nothing or they just fall for no reason. Oh, the good old cell service. No cell service. Another one that gets under my skin is when it's set in another time period just so they don't have to deal with this obstacle of technology. If you set your movie in a certain era, I want it to make sense and I want it to be relevant, right? I don't want it just so you can avoid technology, because obviously most situations can be solved with a cell phone. So this one, I'm sorry, I have to do it. Please stop doing this. How likely is it that you're gonna be somewhere where you don't have cell service? Unless you have like T-Mobile like I do, because I do not get service anywhere. So sometimes it's acceptable and I would let it slide, but I just don't think we need it anymore. Like we don't need that trope anymore. Car won't start. Bonus points if it's a brand new car, like a new 2000s era car that just randomly won't start. Again, just like the cell service thing, we gotta stop doing this. I mean, maybe if it's a really old car and it's not their car and they just find it on the side of the road or something and it's broken down, that makes sense. But just to have your own car not start all of a sudden, like when have you ever gotten in your car and it just didn't start for no reason? That one's probably one of my least favorite tropes. All in their head. Everything was just a mirage. Everything, well, it's kind of similar to everything was a dream, but it was all in their head. You know, this is actually a good one when done properly. Like most of these tropes, I'm gonna put it in once in a while. I think it's good to throw us off a little bit, but it has to be executed really, really well and make it really believable. The hero is actually the killer. Surprise twist ending. This is like a horror twist. Overplayed a little bit, but I will put it in acceptable. I do like a good, oh, it was him all along, oh my gosh, kind of moment. And I don't actually think it is overplayed. I think we could do this a little bit more before it's overplayed, but again, it's got to be done really well. And you really got to throw me off and really make me not believe it's him or her or them. POC dies first, specifically Black people. That is the most common horror trope, I think, is that the Black person in the movie dies first. And they go along with a lot of side characters. They're typically, and you don't see them as the main character, which is a problem. Obviously, this is gonna be in Please Stop Doing This, because at this point in time, it doesn't make sense to keep doing this. Did you know in Friday the 13th franchise, there's only 19 Black characters and 16 of them die? That's ridiculous, I'm sorry. This one is my own addition that I don't think a lot of people realize is actually a trope, but so many horror movies go to the library. Let's go to the library to research. Granted, some of the era makes sense. Maybe when The Ring came out, going to the library for old newspapers was, you know, a thing. It was made in 2002. So yeah, sure, I'd believe that. It's kind of early technology. But again, bringing it back to The Unholy that I just watched, why are you going to the library? You live in a modern era with a cell phone. I mean, granted, they always make it make sense towards the plot, but honestly, It's just kind of cheesy now, and every time there's a library scene in a horror movie, I just chuckle to myself a little bit because it's just like so overplayed, but I don't think people realize that it's like a trope. I'll put it in, I'll let it slide. I don't think we need to stop going to the library. Library is a great place. I think more people should actually go to the library, and it's in my favorite movie of all time. Love library research and The Ring, so you know, I'll let it slide if they continue to do it. But make it make sense. Make it work for the plot, especially if it takes place in modern times. Let's split up. Not accurate. I don't know any situation where I would be in a building or somewhere in a forest and we're looking for an exit and I would say to my friends, let's not stay together. Like, in what scenario is that a good idea? How are you gonna find each other again? Especially if there's no cell service, because there probably won't be because we're in a horror movie. So we're gonna put this in please stop doing it. It doesn't make any sense. I don't know a situation where I would split up from the group that I'm with. Dropping the keys and or the weapon. This one is actually realistic. Overdone, and when they portray it in the movie, you still roll your eyes because it's a little bit cheesy. But if you think about it, it is accurate that that would happen to some people. Probably to me, to be honest. I have anxiety if someone's coming at me and I've never used a knife on anyone before or a gun, God forbid. I don't know what I'm doing. I will probably drop it. I'm gonna put it in acceptable because this, I think, is an accurate thing. Cheesy now in horror movies, we kind of do roll our eyes when it happens. But if you think about it, it's accurate. People do that. The child's imaginary friend. This one I have issues with because it really depends on the friend, right? I think children would be much more afraid of their imaginary friends than movies portray it to be. The girl looks like this, she looks dead, she is dead, she's a ghost. And the girl is like, want to play with dolls? Like, I just don't believe, me as a child, I would have been terrified if any of these plot points in horror movies where there's an imaginary friend and like a ghost talking to me. I did have an imaginary friend named Sarah, actually, because I was not original and creative. I'll let it slide, but I am a little bit tired of it being an excuse for horror movies where it's like a creepy child is talking to someone and then it turns out to be a real spirit. Like, I'm kind of over it at this point. The bullied gets revenge. I think this is a great trope. I think we should see more of it, to be honest. Maybe it had something to do with the fact that I was not popular in high school, or in any school for that matter, but yeah, I like it. I like that plot point. I would keep watching it. I'm gonna put it in needed in every horror movie. The good old medicine cabinet scare tactic. When it's paired with a jump scare too is the absolute worst. You know what I've seen? I'm gonna put this in please stop doing it because I'm tired of it. But this is a great example of a trope that when used properly can actually catch someone off guard, the horror viewer. Because have you seen movies where they go to do the medicine trick, but there's nothing there? There is no jump scare. They make you think that there's going to be something in the mirror because it's been done so many times. And then when there's nothing, you relax a little bit, you breathe, and then, of course, it's followed usually with a jump scare. That is happening more, so that's gonna be a trope in and of itself pretty soon, where it's the medicine cabinet fake out trick. I don't mind it now. I mean, we could still keep doing that, but the old classic jump scare in the medicine cabinet mirror is done. It's over, it's dead. Gratuitous assault against women. Not a fan. I could live for the rest of my life without ever having this exist in horror movies ever. And I know I'm gonna get a lot of comments saying, well, that's the point of horror movies, is to make you feel uncomfortable. And fair, but as a woman, I don't feel comfortable watching these kind of things in a different way. It's a discomfort that is not fun. We're reaching past the entertainment level. We're reaching past the fun level for me, and I'd rather not. Sometimes it's acceptable. Like, this is Last House on the Left. I do own that movie, rarely watch it because of the scene, but I will skip it. You know, there are movies that I enjoy, but I have to skip these scenes. So I'm over it as a horror trope, to be honest. I know a lot of you are as well, because a lot of you said this was your least favorite trope as well. It's just, I'm done with it. We don't need to see it anymore. Like, we know, you know? Okay, this next one is the last one. Indian burial ground. I know it's Native American burial ground, but typically in these movies it's called an Indian burial ground, which I don't personally like. But this one, obviously needs to stop because it's so inaccurate to history. The concepts don't make any sense in traditional Indigenous Native American culture. They just don't exist, you know? I found a really good article about the origin of the burial ground kind of trope in horror movies and some theories about why it exists at all. And I will link that article down below in the comments. I think it's really interesting. But obviously, it's racist. We need to stop doing the burial ground situation. Now, it has been in one of my favorite movies, Pet Sematary. Obviously, I want to bring attention to that. You know, I wish they went with a different route. It didn't have to be a Native American burial ground or an indigenous burial ground. It could have just been a cemetery where you disrespect the dead and they come back to get you. Like that, if they want to do something like that, that storyline, that's what they need to do. They need to not make it about indigenous people. Like it makes no sense. So there you have it. That is my tier list ranking video of all the horror tropes. In top tier, we have Unconvinced Authority, Final Girl, and Bullied Gets Revenge. I'd say those are the 3 top ones that I wouldn't mind seeing in every single movie. I knew the bottom one was going to be a hefty category because I think a lot of tropes are done, and I'm excited to see what kind of new tropes are, you know, come about in the future. If I missed any horror tropes, please leave a comment down below and also share your ranking or your favorite and least favorite horror tropes that you like to see in movies. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.